Welcome to That's the Word, wholesome tales for the whole family. I'm Father James Yamauchi. Today's story, starting on a high note. Walter was ready for the new season. The day was going splendidly. All the hard training and long hours were paying off as thousands poured into the sold-out stadium. It was certainly spring, and the balls were flying as men finished their stretches and warm-ups for the opening day of a new baseball season. Walter looked across the field and saw the team manager, Jimmy, excitingly walking directly to him. Perhaps Jimmy had some last-minute information to give about the opposing team's batters. After all, Walter was the team's star pitcher. When Jimmy got to Walter, however, what he said came completely out of left field. At the last minute, Jimmy had a bright idea for how to really start the season on a high note. Though it was not planned, Jimmy had it all executed in his mind and determined that Walter needed to play a critical role. Walter listened patiently. He agreed that it was a fine way to start the game. It would be icing on the cake for his team's big opener. But Walter disagreed with Jimmy about one thing. Walter did not think himself the man for Jimmy's bright idea and told the manager he did not want to take the spotlight. Jimmy knew why. Walter was a shy and reserved man, which endeared him to the fans and players as a model of sportsmanship. The good-natured Walter did not want to leave Jimmy in a bind and suggested a teammate for the part. Jimmy thanked Walter for the suggestion, but Jimmy could not settle on the idea that the star of his team would not have a role in the big opening. It was time for the game to begin. A corpulent man rose from his prominent seat in the stands. Walter knew that this man's presence was a great honor for his team. Walter was standing near the pitcher's mound as the eyes of all in the field and in the stadium turned to this man. It was this man's presence that gave Jimmy a bright idea that would be a perfect way to start his team's season. The man in the stands would ceremoniously throw the first ball to Walter's teammate. The man, with a wide grin, looked intently into the player's eyes, preparing to hurl the ball toward him. Then, suddenly, to everyone's surprise, the man turned his robust frame and tossed the ball to the unsuspecting Walter. The experienced pitcher had great reflexes, making the catch and causing the crowd in the stadium to go wild. Everyone in the stadium witnessed history in the making, and it was thanks to Jimmy that Walter, despite himself, secured a place in it. Prior to the toss, Jimmy told the distinguished guest of the pitcher's humble reluctance to receive the ball, giving him the idea of tossing the ball to the famed pitcher. Walter made sure the ball was returned so that the man could keep it as a souvenir. To his surprise, the ball was later returned and gifted to Walter with the distinguished guest signature and these words: "To Walter Johnson, with hope that he may be as formidable as in yesterday's game." By the end of his career, Walter would win a World Series, pitch a no-hitter game, and boast a record of 417 to 279 with a 2.17 ERA, earning him a coveted spot among the first inductees to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Thanks to the team manager, Jimmy McAleer. Walter was also the first player to receive the ceremonial toss from his town's most celebrated figure. It was certainly a last-minute decision when, thanks to a rough day at the office, this 300-pound celebrity appeared at the opening game and was offered the honor to toss out the first ball from his place in the stands. Even though one of his predecessors said, "What do you imagine the American people would think of me if I wasted my time at a ball game?" This man's actions that day overturned that precedent and began a venerable tradition of his successors tossing the first pitch. The 27th President of the United States, William Howard Taft. And for this week, that's the word.
Casey was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad. Just to root for the hometown crew, every Sioux, Katie Blue. On a Saturday, her young beau called to see if she'd like to go to see a show, but Miss Kate said no. I'll tell you what you can do. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Of course, everyone is familiar with that popular song, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." If you're like me, though, you did not know the verse or verses of that song. And we were actually going to share a story about the history of the song, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." It's very fascinating. It was written by Jack Norworth. He was riding a subway train and he saw an advertisement for a baseball game, and that made him think of the lyrics for what is now "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Fascinating history is that Jack Norworth had not up to that point ever attended a baseball game. And it wasn't until years later, after the song had become very popular, that he actually went to a baseball game. So very fascinating. But as sometimes with stories on That's the Word, we can't put it in the format that is necessary for our podcast. And so that is a story that I've always been wanting to share, but we just couldn't write a story from it.
Just didn't work. Kind of like the original version of this story didn't actually work.
Exactly. It was going to be a whole nother story about President Taft, about going to, I believe it was a baseball game. It was definitely a sports event. But in doing research, it became clear that the real story was another great historical nugget, that President Taft was the first president to give the first ball toss at a baseball game.
If you enjoy That's the Word, please share the word. You can see the story extras for this story starting on a high note at thunderrock.org, where you can see a picture of President Taft throwing out a first pitch. ThunderRock.org is also where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter and where you can find our email and social links if you have any feedback or story ideas.
Thanks for listening, and join us next Wednesday for another wholesome tale for the whole family.